Campaign years are a pretty busy time in any household, and surely in this one.
I hope that when and if I get my family settled and organized, that I can find a useful outlet somewhere.
So let's talk about Jane Freeman a little bit. She has played such tremendous roles, both nationally, locally, and also even internationally. And of course, her husband, former Governor Orville Freeman. You know, there's a little bit of a Ginger Rogers analogy here. You know, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire could do, except in high heels and going backwards.
All over the country, people are conscious of the momentous issues facing their nation and the world.
I was born and raised in North Carolina. My parents had come from Pennsylvania and were much more liberal than most of the people around us, and they were solid Democrats, except my parents were also critical of the Democrats sometimes too, but felt they were better than the Republicans. So I was properly indoctrinated. When I came to Minnesota, that's when I was a senior in high school. I was already firmly a good, solid Democrat.
I've always believed quite strongly that women have an obligation to do whatever they can do to help other people, even beyond their families, if it's possible, and I certainly would hope eventually to be able to do something.
Going to the university is what really changed my life. That was where I felt I blossomed, and I loved the extracurricular activities. That's where I really learned to organize and develop the organizational skills that have been important to me all the rest of my life. Move into student government became the most important because that's where I met my future husband. In those days, you didn't hang with just one person. You usually dated several people, but then there'd get to be a special one. It wasn't love at first sight, it was love at first date. We were friends, and we had voted alike on all kinds of things on the council. So we knew, and we discussed these various issues, that we knew we were liberal. And by then, also World War II was brewing in Europe. Orville's in law school, and I'm in graduate school, and comes Pearl Harbor. The Saturday after Pearl Harbor, we're going over to Humphrey's apartment for a gathering of all the political people to talk politics and stuff. But we stop on the way over, and he asks me to marry him and produces the diamond. So, then we go back and show it to my folks and celebrate a little bit, and then go over to Humphrey's house. So it was a very political celebration of these two wild-eyed Democrats coming together. He was called up in January, and I'm still in graduate school. But we decided that we're going to get married. Then he was overseas for almost about a year and a month. We didn't have any such thing as email then. I wrote every single day of the whole year that he was gone. It was a very yeasty time. We just felt like we'd gotten through this war, and there had to be a better way to do things, and that we had to get busy and save the world. And if we worked hard enough, we could. And so we just were working our hearts out, but enjoying it and sharing it, which is the beauty I realize increasingly as I'm older and I see other people's lives that not always enjoyed both partners enjoying the political participation and or agreeing, and we really did, which was marvelous. Orville very much wanted me to go back to school, but there was just no way we could afford it. We didn't have any babysitter, and both Orville's mother and my mother were employed. So in those days, there were not as many women. There were women co-chairwomen in most of the congressional districts in the counties, but not women political candidates. And so I was Orville's backup. And then when he was elected governor, and I became First Lady of Minnesota, then we did not have a governor's mansion. We didn't have any staff either. I was chief cook and bottle washer, chauffeur for the kids, and running the governor's home, not a mansion, but also trying to travel around the state to speak at many organizations and groups that were inviting you, or going to people's annual meetings and associations. So I had a very rich opportunity to participate along with Orv in that post-World War II period.
Well, Mrs. Freeman, how about you?
Me? I'm just going to try to keep track of you. That's not easy.
We went on a trip to South America on a goodwill mission with a group of other governors, and that gave me a good chance to talk with Orv. And we talked many hours on the airplane because there were long flights to Brazil and Argentina and Chile. We really talked at great length about what we wanted to do. And Orv just said, agriculture is such a mess. And I said to him over and over again, but Orv, with all that food and all the world's hungry people, and you've always said one of the chief things you couldn't believe is how come we had to have hunger in the world when we could produce so much food, and here's your chance. And so I guess maybe I felt that I had something to do with his decision.
I've asked Governor Orville Freeman of Minnesota to become the Secretary of Agriculture in the new administration.
So he's working sort of night and day, and I'm trying to get the household settled and the kids organized, and meanwhile to start participating in all the things that cabinet wives were expected to do then, because at that time, very few, actually none of the cabinet wives in the Kennedy administration were employed. Since I was already one of the politically oriented ones, why the Democratic National Committee glommed on to Women's Division glommed on to me.
As you know, we now have 103 embassies in Washington from 103 countries, and this is a lot of people to get to know, and they want to know our government people as well as our government people need to know them. And this kind of exchange is helpful on a social level, but where it's not so cut and dried as it is in a business meeting. But the real business of, say, of a cabinet member with congressmen is carried on at Capitol Hill. It's not carried on at cocktail parties. I think people like to think it's carried on at cocktail parties, and I think you get to know people better at social functions, but it's really not like you read in some books.
In any case, it's been a very rich life, and I'm so lucky to be alive to see one more, I think, real resurgence, like right after World War II and with the Kennedy period, that we have a chance to make a difference. It seems like every time we have a disaster, like a horrible thing like World War II, or now with the housing crisis, the world food crisis, the energy crisis, just the disastrous war and upset in the Middle East, that somebody really great comes along. And that's when everybody's willing to compromise a little here or work harder there, and particularly young people feel like they have a chance to make a difference, and do. I have to believe it.
That from now on, I'm going to think of Jane Freeman as a Ginger Rogers of Minnesota politics.
Well, I guess it's a question of what you consider politicking. I figure the process of living is the process of politicking.